Greetings, children. Today, we have a very special topic. Today, we're talking about word problems. Now, good thing about word problems is everybody loves word problems. So, we've done word problems in all my classes since you guys have started 7th grade, 8th grade, whatever grade you're in. And these word problems are going to be a little bit different, and a lot of people actually think they're easier when you get to use the two variables with two equations. So setting up a system of equations is actually easier to set up the word problem. So if you're comfortable solving a system of equations, which hopefully you are becoming comfortable with that, then it should be no problem. So let's look at an example. So listen closely. If the sum of two numbers is 12 and their difference is 2, find the numbers. So we're looking for two numbers that add up to 12 and have a difference of 2. So since we have two different numbers, we're going to have our first number and our second number. Now normally we would try to say, like, which one don't we know anything about and how do we figure that out and go through this process. But here we'll just say our first one's x and our second one's y. So that part is so much easier because now we just have two variables. So we don't have to worry about, oh, well, if this one's x and this one's that, or this one's x, the other one's x plus 2, and the other one's 16 minus x plus 3 squared. So the very first part here, a lot easier. Next thing we do is we look back at our problem and we try to write equations. So instead of trying to write an equation from our information, we're trying to write two equations. So here it says the sum of two numbers, so x plus y equals 12. And then it said their difference is 2. So that means x minus y equals 2. And now we have our system. So x plus y equals 12, x minus y equals 2. Now you can solve this system any way that you like. You can solve it with graphing, you can solve it with the substitution method, or you can solve it with elimination. Sometimes, depending on how your equations are set up, it's easier to solve with one method or another. In this case, it's going to be easier to solve with the elimination method, which is what we've been covering for the last few days. So let's take a look at that. Since these are already opposites, this one's pretty straightforward as far as setting up the elimination method. We get 2x, this is just 0, because these are already opposites, equals 14. And now you can already see, we already know one of the numbers, because our next step is to solve here. Solve this simple equation, 2x equals 14. Divide both sides by 2, you get x equals 7. So that means that your first number is 7. And then our second number, we're going to figure out by substituting into one of the equations. Once again, you can substitute into either equation when you're using this method. So just pick one of the equations. Sometimes it's easier to substitute into one instead of another. Like this one, it's probably easier to substitute into the top. We would have 7 plus y equals 12. Subtract 7 from both sides, so you get y equals 5. Alright? And then anytime you do a word problem, you want to make sure that your answers make sense. So in this case, take a look at our answers. We have 7 and 5. So let's think about what the original problem said. They have a sum, they add up to 12. Okay, well, 7 plus 5 is 12. That's good. They have a difference of 2. 7 minus 5 is 2. So there we go. That's our first word problem using a system of equations. Now, they do get a little bit more complicated than that, of course. What fun would it be if they didn't? If they were just all super easy, then you'd be bored. So let's take a look at another one that might be a little bit more complicated. As I said earlier, the good thing about these is that you get to set up two equations with two variables. So you don't have to do that first part where you're trying to figure out what the equation should be. It should be, well, you get to do it in the equation step instead of in the first step where you're just setting things up. Alright, so let's take a look at this one. If you have your book, it's number 32 on page 292. So let me read the problem. Remember, your first step anytime you're doing a word problem is to read the entire problem first. That lets you know all the information that's there, and it kind of gives you an idea of what you're trying to do. Then you set up your variables, then you set up your equations, and then you solve. And then you check to make sure your answer makes sense. So, let's go ahead and read this problem. It says, Thomas bakes pies for a local caterer. Kind of apropos since it was Pie Day recently. On Tuesday, he made 3 peach pies and 6 cherry pies, costing him $48 in expenses. Friday, he spent $54.50 to make 7 peach pies and 4 cherry pies. What's the cost of each peach and each cherry pie? So here, instead of just having our first number and second number and being super generic like the last one was, it tells us some specific things. We have peach pies and we have cherry pies. So we're just going to make one of them X and one of them Y. Now, of course, you could use different variables if you wanted. If you wanted to use P for peach pie and C for cherry pie, feel free. I'm just kind of stuck on using X and Y. I think it adds some consistency to the problems. So now we need to set up our equations. Remember, first step, read the problem. Second step, set up your variables. So we write down what we're trying to find, give each one a variable. Next step, we're going to write our equations. Remember, we have 2 variables, so we need 2 equations. So the first equation, it says, on Tuesday, he made 3 peach pies and 6 cherry pies, costing him $48 in expenses. So remember, this is the cost of a peach pie, cost of a cherry pie. So that means if he made 3 peach, it would be 3x, and then 6 cherry, so plus 6 cherry, 6y, then his cost is 48. And then the next sentence says he spent $54.50 to make 7 peach and 4 cherry. And that was $54.50. So you can see, once again, we set up our equation. Now we need to figure out what would be our best steps to solve. Do we want to use the addition method or elimination method? Do we want to use substitution? Do we want to use some other method, like graphing? So, this one we could do by substitution. We could solve this top one for x and substitute it in. Or we could do the elimination method. A lot of students, once they learn the elimination method, they prefer it over all the others. So, it's up to you. But let's try this one with substitution. So we're going to solve the top equation for x. So we get 3x plus 6y equals 48. So 3x equals 48 minus 6y. Divide everything by 3. So, anybody know what's 48 divided by 3? Anybody? 16, did you say 16? Good job. Thank you. So we get x equals 16 minus 2y. Now, next step, we're going to substitute into the bottom equation for x. So when we substitute in, we'd have 7 times this group 16 minus 2y plus 4y equals 5450. All right, now we have to do 7 times 16, so we get 42, 112, minus 14y plus 4y equals 5450. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and combine our like terms here, so we get 112 minus 10y equals 5450. Subtract 112 from both sides. So we would have 5450 minus 112. We get negative 10y is equal to 5750. Negative 5750. So that means when we divide, we end up with 575. And remember, that's for y here. So y is equal to 575. And that's the cost of a cherry pie. To find the cost, we can substitute into the end of step 1. So we're going to sub into the end of step 1. Okay. And here we had x equals 16 minus 2 times y. So x equals 16 minus 2 times 575. So we get 16 minus 1150. Which means that x is equal to $4.50. So x equals 450. So that means the cost for a peach pie is $4.50. And the cost for a cherry pie is $5.75. So you can see this problem was a bit more complicated, but still very doable. Let's go through the steps one more time. First, we read the problem, then we set up our variables. We had two different things here, peach pies, cherry pies. We used the information in the problem to set up our equations. In this case, 3 peach pies, 6 cherry pies cost $48. 7 peach pies and 4 cherry pies is $54.50. You can use whichever method you like to solve. Here, I used the substitution method. So we solved for x, substituted into the other equation, solved that one. We got that y is equal to 575. Substituted back into step 1. That's the substitution method. And now at the end, we check and make sure our answer makes sense. So 450 and 575, those answers seem reasonable. So you could check it by substituting in and getting these answers. We're not going to take the time and do that in this video, but when you're doing your homework, you do need to do that. So, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the word problems. Oh, there's hearts above my head. Huh, who knew? I guess that's because everybody loves word problems. Thanks, have a great day.